All right, you guys ready? All right, well, welcome everyone to the webinar, Parenting Through a Pandemic. It is a gorgeous evening. I am looking out two windows in my home and the sun is shining and the leaves are starting to come out and it's a beautiful night. And so we are very thankful that you chose to spend some time this evening with us. I want to introduce myself. My name is Amy Prevo and I am the Director of Northville Youth Network. And my colleagues with me tonight are Matt Swartz from PCS-Counseling and Jennifer Frush from New Hope Center for Grief Support. All of us are located here in Northville, and they will introduce themselves in a moment. But before they do, I want to, again, thank you for sharing your evening with us. We also have with us Beth Santer from Northville Public Schools and Sarah Jacobs from Northville Public Schools. They are providing our technical support for us tonight. They are our Zoom wizards. We couldn't do this without them. So in case you either hear someone speaking or see a name, that's who's there lurking in the shadows. I think we can all agree that these last few months have been some of the most challenging times that we've ever faced in our lifetime. And due to the uncertainty with what lies ahead, it'll probably remain so, at least for the near future. I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is how to navigate the situation as parents and caregivers and our families and keep our households going. And so what we wanted to do was spend some time talking about that tonight. You know, emotions are running high because of, uncertainty. We've experienced grief and loss in a lot of different ways. Things are stressful, and as adults, we're working through those issues as best as we can. But I think it's important that we recognize and acknowledge that our kids are going through some stuff too. They're going through some struggles. They might not be the same, or they might not be as big a struggles as that we are facing as adults, but to them, they're huge. And so we wanted to take a little bit of time to address some of those issues. And tonight we hope we provide for you some clarity on why we're feeling the way that we're feeling, how this is impacting our kids emotionally, and what we can do as parents to help and caregivers to help support our kids through this. So during our webinar tonight, we are going to introduce ourselves, tell a very brief little intro to who we are and what we do. Matt is going to present a wonderful presentation, and then we're going to open up for questions and answers and comments from the participants, you guys. So as I said, I'm Amy Prevo from the Northville Youth Network. We are an organization that works with youth and families in Northville. We are supported by the city and the township of Northville. Our office, when we're in our office, is located downtown in the community center. And we do a variety of things to support youth and families in the community. Education awareness programs on a variety of topics. We have a mentoring program. We do leadership development opportunities for kids. School connection and transition programs, things like Camp Hillside, Camp Meads Mill, peer-to-peer at Meads Mill, and some other in-school based programming. We also run a youth assistance program where we work in partnership with the police departments of the city and the township of Northville, where we run a diversion program for first-time juvenile offenders. And we also provide behavioral supports for our school districts as well. And then finally, we do casework support and referral resources for families in our community who need some additional help. We put them in touch to local behavioral health resources. I live in Northville Township. I have a 21-year-old college student who's back home unexpectedly because of this. And I have a 16-year-old who's a sophomore at the high school. So I'm right in there in the trenches with you guys. So Jennifer, I'll turn it to you.
All right, thank you, Amy. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Frush. I'm the Executive Director at New Hope Center for Grief Support. For those of you that are unfamiliar with our organization, we are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, and our mission is to bring hope, healing, and new beginnings to children, families, and adults grieving the death of a loved one. We offer lots of different programs, individual support, group support, peer support, programs, seminars, trainings to help everybody better understand grief. And with that being said, grief doesn't always apply just to a death. It applies to our losses. And grief is a universal experience that we all feel, and it's based on our own personal experiences. With that being said, everybody's is a little bit different. So during these trying times, it's okay. It's normal, it's natural, and it's necessary to process each of these feelings in order to successfully develop and move forward. So New Hope is a great organization. It's been around for 20 years. Our center is in downtown Northville. We service families, individuals across southeastern Michigan. The programs are absolutely free to all grieving individuals and families, and we welcome anybody that is looking or is in need of grief support and that grief based on a death of a loved one. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Amy. Hi, everybody. I am Matt Swartz. I am a therapist in private practice and the director of training and development at PCS-Counseling. We are a local private practice counseling outfit. When I started, there were only a couple of us, and since then I've been able to work with Dr. John, our CEO, to grow our team to 14 different therapists and counselors. We all have different specializations. I work with anxiety, trauma, high performers, and leaders. And my staff, I have a staff that works with a lot of different kids and families. Our clinical director, Kristen Ryson, is an expert in working with kids and families. And I have a number of therapists on staff. I used to do that work, but I've hired therapists who are really amazingly skilled and talented in working with kids and families. For my part, I am a Northville Schools grad. I did it. I made it out alive. Went to Northville first grade all the way through, went out, went to college, moved to New York, did some grad school, and then moved back, opened up my private practice about 5.5 years. So I have a big heart for Northville. I know what it's like to be a Northville student. I have a vague idea of what it's like to be a Northville parent. But I also am an expert in helping, children and families through grief and trauma, and that's what this pandemic is. So I'm here tonight to provide some context and some information to make navigating this journey a little easier. And I'm thrilled to be here with Jen and Amy and our partners in Northville Schools, just to let you guys know you are not alone. We will get through this together. We are a community. This is Northville. And we're going to do this together. So I'm very thankful that you all are here tonight. And I'm hoping the information I will provide will be helpful. And we're excited to get your questions and engage in the real challenges that we're all facing on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I think we are ready to rock and roll into the presentation. Is that fair? Okay, here we go. So let me see. Okay, so welcome to Parenting Through a Pandemic. So again, I'm Matt Swartz. I'm the guy who's going to give you guys this information. This information comes from my background, both growing up in Northville as well as working in a private practice at providing therapy to Northville families. So if anybody is interested in following along, afterwards, there's a bit link there. You guys will also see that at the end. You'll get it in an email as well. But all the slides will be available at that bit link, which is bit.ly/parentingpandemic. It'll take you to my Google Drive, and you guys will all be able to access these slides. So you don't have to worry about taking photos of your screen. So guys, what is this thing? What's happening right now? We've been in this stay-at-home order for 6 weeks plus now. What's going on? The answer is trauma and grief. And I want to talk about each of those real quickly. So trauma is what happens when there's too much pain for our brains and our bodies to process. So when I say the word trauma, you probably think of war or assault or these really horrible things that happen. And yes, that's absolutely true. Those are traumas. But what's important is that trauma is contextual, which is to say, depending on the person, one thing can be traumatic to somebody and not to another. And there's also big T trauma and little t trauma, right? So big T trauma is like, if a horrible thing happens, I go out to war, I come back really damaged. There's also little t trauma, like I stood up and I gave a class presentation in 4th grade and everybody laughed at me and now I can't stand up to speak anymore. So trauma, there's a big range of it. And what's important to understand is this right now, this pandemic, this is trauma. This is nobody in their lifetime has experienced something like this. Maybe this could be akin to like World War II, right? But this is a far-reaching, deeply painful experience that we're all having together, right? So we're vulnerable, even if we want to think that we've got this all under control. But if we're vulnerable, our kids are even more vulnerable. And the problem is it's invisible. So we can't necessarily see what's going on. But what's happening is our bodies are still working to adjust. It's physiological, so we can't see it. But we're adjusting to this massive change and this massive pain, and it's uncomfortable for everybody. So believe it or not, we're still in shock, most of us, right? So that's the trauma component. And then there's the grief component. So as Jen mentioned, grief isn't just death, right? Let's say grief is dealing with loss. So that could be real, actual death. Many of us probably have a friend or a loved one at this point who's already passed away due to COVID. I have. Right? I know somebody who has already passed, and that's real, right? This isn't just happening on the news. This is happening in real life. But also, we've lost normal. We've lost Northville, right? We didn't move to Northville to lose it. We moved to Northville because we had this nice plan, right? This nice way of getting our kids the future that we wanted to build. But we've all lost that normal right now. And the hard news is there is no going back. So what we have to do together, and it starts with us in our daily lives, in our families, and then ultimately in our community, is to create a new normal. Now that's scary, but it's also freeing because it means we get to define what we're about to create together. So if we can start at the right set point and move forward together as a community, we're going to be able to create a new normal that is beneficial for as many of us and our families as humanly possible. So we're working through this grief. We're working through this trauma, right? What's going on? How does this work? So let's start with some basics. I'm going to start simple. I'm going to get more complex, and then I'm going to simplify again, right? So what are the keys, Matt? What are the bottom lines for helping myself, my kids, my family? Back to the basics, right? So this is a yucky word for some people, but I'm going to call it radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is this thing is happening and we need to fully accept it, right? There is a pandemic and we need to fully accept that's happening and accept that we don't know what to do about it, right? So what do is we start with ourselves, right? That airplane, we got to put our oxygen masks on before we affix it to our child's. Why? Right? It goes against everything we're trained to do. Like, no, put the child's mask on first. But if you pass out putting on your child's mask, you're not going to be very helpful, right? So we want to get that oxygen mask on ourselves so that then we can assist that child. So what does that mean? That means our bodies are adjusting first, then our minds. Those of us in Northville, we're pretty smart. We like to get our minds to move forward before our bodies do. Unfortunately, that's not how grief and trauma work. We're going to have to help our bodies normalize first, then our minds can kick in, right? So what does that mean? Real tangibly, super simple, reduce the incoming stimuli and increase your processing time, which is to say less news, less Facebook, less stuff coming in, less information, simplify that information and increase the time you're spending in silence, right? Processing, thinking, feeling through what's happening. That's what helps our brains and bodies to adjust the best. So for a lot of us, this is going to feel like chutes and ladders. I hope most of you played this game. I certainly did growing up. You roll the dice, you spin the spinner, you try to get up the pathway with the ladders that move you quick and the chutes that move you down. Guys, we got all the way up to space number 83 and we hit a chute and now we're all the way back down at space 7. And it's really debilitating, right? Again, a lot of us in Northville, we're forward progress, moving to the next thing kind of people. And it feels really yucky. Somebody knocks you down a chute and there's nothing you can do about it. But again, that's where we come back to the radical acceptance. So, okay, we're back at the beginning. That means we need to go back to the basics, right? What does that mean? That means meeting our core needs. And I'm going to dive a little more deeply into that. What are our core needs? But at the end of the day, I want to assure you guys, we will figure this out. We will adapt. That's what makes humans uniquely suited to dealing with a challenge like this. So these are some of those keys, right? So let me get a little more complicated for a second. I'm super hopeful that none of you are clinical neurologists viewing this, because you may balk at my oversimplified brain. But I was a smart kid, but when I sat in AP Psych class and they started going over all the 14, 29 different parts of the brain, I tuned out. I fell asleep. So what I've learned in my career is making the brain simple is what helps us to understand how it works. So as you can see, I've divided the brain into 4 main colored components. Well, kind of 5, but 4 main colored components. So I'm going to walk you through this real quick and then tell you how this relates to what's going on for all of us, right? Because all of this is so abstract. Seeing what's going on inside helps us to make it tangible. So that gray part of your brain, that's your lizard brain. That's the hindbrain. That's the part that works on fight or flight and body regulations. That's the thing that beats your heart, chews your food, gets you up and walking. And fight or flight is what helps us deal with danger, right? So this part of our brain, this part was built for survival, okay? Animal brain, that's your limbic system. This is the part of your brain that deals with emotions, feelings, and memories. This is where your reactions occur. So when something makes you angry and you go, ah, right, that's your green brain's lighting up. Or something makes you excited, thrilled, that's your green brain lighting up. Then your red brain is your primate brain. This is your neocortex. This is where your thoughts, subconscious programming, autopilot, patterns, and beliefs come from. These are where our habits are stored. So what this means is this portion, this is our thinking brain. And this is, just to be honest, this is the portion of our brain that we love in Northville. It's all about getting things done and understanding and being smart, right? So, but this part of the brain is not the most important part. The most important part, in my opinion, is the blue region of the brain. This is the uniquely human part of the brain. This is called the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC for short. This is where our awareness, our focus, our imagination, and our abstract thought are contained. What does that mean? This is the part of our brain that allows us to imagine a reality, choose it, and create it, right? These buildings we're all sitting in, somebody used the frontal lobe of their brain to imagine it and create it for us, right? So that all sounds pretty cool, but here's the bad news. When the lower order regions of your brain light up, it can turn off all the rest of your brain. You're going to see that 5th little yellow dot there, the amygdala. This is the little part that mediates our stress response. And when this thing shifts on, the rest of our brain can turn off. So the amygdala actually activates back and forth between the gray and the green regions of our brain. And it based on our emotion moves us into stress, or based on our body moves us into emotion. So at the end of the day, what that means is if the gray part of your brain is lighting up, if you're in fight or flight mode, it shuts off the green, the red, and the blue parts of your brain. If the green part of your brain lights up, and we've all been here, we have a big emotion, logic goes out the window, right? I'm just angry, right? Or I'm just sad. And so that's that green part of that brain taking over. Now, the red part of the brain can also shut down the blue part when we go into our old patterns, habits, and beliefs, right? So when you're brushing your teeth and you're not thinking about it, your red part has shut off your blue part. Or when you're going on the same route you always take to work every day, that's the red part. So even the red part can shut down that blue part. The truth is we spend about 10% or less of our day in the blue region of our brain. And what my job is to help people grow that blue region so they can spend more time. What's going on right now is that the stress and chaos of the pandemic are causing our gray brain to turn on and shut down the rest of our brain. And that is part of this grief process. That's part of this trauma process. The gray and the green regions of our brain are lighting up like wildfire, turning off some of the best regions of our brain. And by the way, you can't notice when this happens. Very rarely do you notice when this happens. So my job is to help give you guys tools to help those gray and those green regions of the brain especially get into some healing mode, right? So that then we can successfully flip on the red and then the blue regions of the brain. So I'm going to walk you guys through that today. So right now, like I said, we're here. We're in the gray and we're in the green and we're in that amygdala. We're in that stress response. So what do we do, right? So the answer is we meet our needs. That is how we work on regulating our brain. So some of you may be familiar with something called Maslow's hierarchy. If you're not, it's a fancy way of organizing human needs. And as you can see, it's a pyramid. And what it says is that there are essential needs on the bottom. And as we slowly scale up to the top, these needs become more and more complex, but they're all rooted in that fundamental foundation, right? If we don't build a healthy foundation for a house, it's going to fall down, right? You can build all the plywood and all the beams you want, but if there's no foundation, it's going to crumble, right? So on the bottom of this hierarchy in soft gray is our physiological needs. Guys, this is the basic stuff. This is, I need to eat food, drink water, sleep, right? I have physiological needs as a human, right? The next rung up is safety. This is physical and psychological safety. So what does this mean? This means if I don't feel safe, right, I can't get to those higher order needs. This happens for us all of the time. I get very accomplished professionals walking into my office saying, help me. And they think they're working on that higher level stuff. But the truth is they've never figured out how to help their bodies feel safe, let alone in a crisis, let alone in a pandemic. Right now, what's happening is the ways we were meeting our safety needs no longer work. So that's going back to basics, right? How do I help my family feel safe? 6 weeks ago, it was, I'm going to go to the grocery store and make sure I have enough rice and beans just in case, right? We did that, but now we're just kind of hovering, right? How do I feel safe? And the more information we get from the internet and the news, more and more reasons we shouldn't feel safe, right? So how do we meet that safety need? Right? Then comes connection, right? Connection is our need to be with other humans, be in community, right? Right now, that's really challenging. We've got our family, but we're in week 6, right? So week 7, I think, actually. So a lot of us are like, I could do with a little less of this connection right now and a little more of some of the other connections I've had, right? It being with just your family can get really tense and complicated and difficult. So that's the next need, is that connection, right? Which we're all lacking right now because we're all socially isolated. Then comes esteem. Who am I? What's my identity? Why do I matter? What's my job? What's my position, right? And then comes what we call self-actualization, which is, how do I live my best life, right? How do I find fulfillment, joy, happiness, right? How do I make the world a better place? But again, it's all built on that foundation. Now, you should notice that these needs have very similar colors to that brain I just showed you. If you do, thank you for playing along at home. These needs are correlated to certain brain regions, right? So as we meet these needs, we satisfy the needs of our brain and our body. So I'm going to take you guys through how to do that. So right now, we're on physiological and safety, and we got to start there. And most of us aren't trained on how to do that. So that's where I come in. I'm here to help. Don't worry. So we're dealing with 4 main losses. Remember, we said grief is loss, right? So I'm going to take you through each of those losses. There's the loss of normalcy, which is gray. There's the loss of connection, which is green. The loss of control, which is red. And the loss of identity, which is blue. So let me take you guys through one at a time. We're going to start with gray to build up that safety, right? So we're dealing with the loss of normalcy, which triggers a fear of change, right? Everything's changing and we don't like it. It was better before it changed, right? So that fear of change is being triggered for all of us, right? The human body is only designed to deal with a certain amount of change at a time. So what does that mean? We've lost stability, right? The normal things that were propping us up are gone. We've lost structure. The structure we had in our life, go to get the kids to school, go to work, do these things, the structure we had set up is broken apart completely. So that leads to a loss of safety, right? I don't feel safe anymore because my world didn't look like it used to work. So we also gain things that we don't want, right? There are things like all these extra responsibilities. I had 2 parents working and now we have to take care of these kids and do all of this stuff. We have all of these, I have to help them with their homework, so all of these things that we've gained that we don't want also comes with that change. So we've lost a lot, we've gained things we don't want. So man, what do? How do we regain normalcy? We find stability. So this is where we get tangible. Number 1, create routines, right? If you can, and again, depending on child's age, utilize a shared calendar so that everybody has access to where everybody's going to be and what's going on. So you can do that physically, like you can have a desk calendar, you can have a whiteboard calendar, you can do it online, you can do it on Google, right? you want to encourage your kids to collaborate. So what I always recommend is like having a day, maybe it's Saturday, maybe it's Sunday, to kind of talk through the schedule for the coming week. And it's okay if you got a 6-year-old, if you got a 7-year-old, they don't exactly get it. That's okay. You're still telling them, right? And do it quickly. But at the very least, collaborating with the adults and the older children on what our week is going to kind of look like, where we're going to be, how we're going to be spending our time. Now, I'm not saying you set a schedule and stick to it no matter what. It's just a baseline to sort of develop some level of routine and structure in the house, right? So what does that mean? That means focusing right now on just small morning and evening routines, right? So maybe it's we have dinner at this time, or we go on a walk at this time, or we get ready at this time, right? Now, we do our best. It's never going to be perfect. And it's okay if you, especially if you have teenagers, if they don't conform to the routines, right? But setting up a routine for yourself, and then especially for your younger kids who crave structure, is going to be super helpful. So next, number 2 is simplify, right? It's a great time to declutter and clean. I'm probably preaching the choir. Most of you have probably already cleaned your house. It's week 7. I don't need to tell you, but decluttering and cleaning is really important, not just physically, but emotionally, right? So what that means is letting go of things that aren't working, right? So you try to set a routine and it doesn't work. Okay, let that go, right? Or there were old things that we used to do that don't work anymore. We might have to let that go. We might have an ideal like, oh, I want to, we used to have 7 activities, so I want to have these activities, right? We might need to simplify that and break it down to 1 or 2 activities, right? So it's going to be simplify as number 2. Then third is going to be regulate your body. Most of us were never taught to do this. I have dealt with anxiety and panic attacks, and I was forced to learn how to regulate my body. Very luckily, I haven't had any in quite a long time, but now I have the skills to teach you guys. So something called bilateral stimulation is one of the things I'm a huge fan of. And effectively what this means is just stimulating both sides of our body intermittently. So an example of bilateral stimulation is walking. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Another example would be something silly like patty cake, right? Rhythm is really important to our body. It lets us know to regulate. 100 years ago, we used to walk 4 hours a day on average. Now we walk 30. We have a built-in way of regulating our nervous system we don't use. For those of you who are interested, you can YouTube something called butterfly hug. And this is something you can learn and you can teach your kids. Basically, you cross your arms over your chest, and you tap slowly on alternate sides of your shoulders. This bilateral stimulation, if you do it really for about a minute or 2, it's going to calm your body and let your body know that everything's okay, right? So rhythm and breathing as well. Breathing exercises can be really important. I'm a big fan of like simple paced breathing, which is like slowly in, slowly out, right? As I said, the importance of movement, going on walks, going on runs, going on bike rides. Our bodies were meant to move. And it's really important. And then finally, regulating your body. You're going to need to rest and sleep more than you did in the past, period. And I just want to invite you to make that okay. And I want to make it okay for your kids, and I want to make it okay for you. So if that means getting up later, if that means going to bed earlier, it's okay that you need to rest. Your body is going through grief and trauma. It needs to heal. So finally, tip number 4 is mindfulness, right? I want to encourage the value of silence. We have lost the art of doing nothing. We're always busy, especially in Northville. There's immense value in silence, right? Going to the woods, sitting in your backyard, right? Again, reduce the stimuli, increase your time for processing. And then a great tool for mindfulness is using your 5 senses to just soothe your body. So whether that means taking a bubble bath or looking at a piece of art or listening to a piece of calming music, we have the ability to calm our body. Right now, that's the most important. So create routines, simplify, regulate, and regulate your body, mindfulness. That is how we find stability. So next is that green loss of connection. So that fear underneath that is a fear of rejection, of people leaving us, right? We are tribe animals. We are tribe creatures. We want to be in social connection. So right now, we're all experiencing loneliness, even if you're trying to convince yourself you're not. I do that a lot, right? There's also a strain on family relationships because we're over relying on family relationships right now for our connection and our support. So there's going to be some fears, right? Fear of losing friends, fear of losing loved ones. So right now, that means there's a need for real love more than ever, for that deep, pure love that we want to be able to give our kids, right? So one of that means is like kind of noticing that we used to gain a lot of our self-worth from connection. And right now that may not be possible. So how do we attend to that self-value without those connections? And then how do we also challenge the shame that's coming up, right? I'm supposed to be super mom or super dad. I'm supposed to do everything to make these kids feel okay and comfortable. I'm supposed to be able to work the same amount I was working and take care of these kids, right? The shame right now. Where did we go? Okay, back to share. I'm embracing disconnection, ladies and gentlemen. I was disconnected. I'm embracing it. All right. Thank you for your patience. Rediscovering connection, right? What that looks like, to find belonging, we got to rediscover connection. So making sure that we're looking at the connections that are right in front of us, right? Taking time with our families, eating dinner together, going on walks, talking, game night, puzzles, right? Whatever we can do to make sure that we're connecting with the people who are right in front of us, right? And creating new connections. So it may be cumbersome for some of us parents, but those Zoom calls, those are going to be important to keeping friends and people connected. And right now we need to teach our kids how to maintain that connection, right? So that means us connecting with people. Now, there is something is real. It's called Zoom fatigue. Our brains were not made to be doing these web chats all day. That's okay. We don't need to do it all. We just need to do the little amount that we can. So rediscovering connection. Second is learning skills or utilizing our skills of active listening, right? What that means is we are here to validate our children, not to fix their problems. In other words, to be that sounding board, that place to have that conversation without needing to fix it for them, right? I know it's tempting. I know you're the parent. I know you want to make it all better. But right now, the most important part is for them just to know that they are safe, right? So that means giving love and attention and not expecting change in return, right? So not expecting them always to be able to follow through on the chores or responsibilities, giving them that unconditional love regardless of their behavior, which doesn't mean not pushing them to do better, right? So next is answer and explain, is making sure you've already, I'm sure most of you have, and if you hadn't, it's not too late. Invite your children to ask questions about COVID. And it's okay if you don't know all the answers, right? So it's okay for them to ask and you say, honey, I don't know. I'm going to ask somebody and I'm going to figure that out for you, right? And providing answers at age appropriate levels, right? So you don't tell a 6-year-old the same thing you tell a 13-year-old. I can't give you step-by-step. It's different with every kid, but the answer is, basically answer the questions they ask is always a good way to do it, right? You don't need to provide a ton of extra information. Just answer the questions they're asking, right? So answer and explain. And then number 4, finally, is accept and ask for help. You, in your family unit, you need to identify strengths and weaknesses. And it's okay if you can't do everything. It's okay if you need to ask for help. So that means asking spouses, employers, and others for what we need. A lot of us are really scared to ask our employers, hey, I need to take care of my kids. I can't do everything I was doing before. But you'd be surprised, most people who are asking for help are getting that leniency, right? So being willing to ask for that help, being willing to appear weak can be really, really important. That's finding belonging. So next is that loss of control, that fear of uncertainty. So guys, Northville community, these are our slides, okay? This is the stuff that's probably going to be freaking us out more than everything, right? That fear of uncertainty. We like certainty. So number 1, our expectations have been violated. We had the plan, guys. We had the plan. We were going to do this thing. It was going to go a certain way. We're going to work the job. We're going to send our kids to school. And now everything is broken, right? Our expectations have been violated. So what that means is we got to let go of those old plans. But that red part of your brain is like, but we practiced those plans. So it's going to be hard, right? But here's the deal. We can't predict the future, right? I know a lot of parents are concerned about, well, what about my juniors? What about, taking the tests we need to take? What about setting up college applications? We don't even know what college is going to look like starting in the fall, right? We can't predict the future right now. So what that's going to mean is we're going to go to blame a lot. They should. Right? The governor, the state, the schools, right? There's going to be a lot of blame, and I'm going to encourage us to challenge that blame. Blame is a way of discharging pain so that we don't have to deal with that uncertainty, right? So what do? Okay, so let's start with number 1 is we release the expectations. First of yourselves, then of your kids. The same expectations you had aren't going to fly. And in fact, they're grieving, they're in trauma, right? Like, imagine they just lost a really good friend. That's the level of load that's on their body right now. So we really have to release some of those expectations, and also of others, right? Expecting others to be perfect in a time of crisis, that's not realistic. So we need to do our best to release some of that blame. So the more we can accept the situation, the more we're going to reduce regret, the less of that if COVID hasn't happened. COVID happened, right? There is no if COVID hadn't happened, right? So letting go of that is really hard, but really important. So next is control the small things. So we can't control the big things right now. Let's control the small things. So let's create shared activities. Let's create small plans together, once, twice, 3 times a week. Let's impact your immediate environment, right? You can change your house. You can change your backyard, right? A lot of people are upset about the garden centers being closed because that was their way of controlling, right? If I can just garden, things are going to be okay. So it's okay to control the small things. Keep your house clean or reorganize a room, create shared activities together, okay? Number 3 is limit the consumption of information. I probably said this 50,000 times. I'm going to keep saying it. I would encourage you to schedule news chunks, schedule social media chunks, which means I'm going to read the news for 15 minutes and then I'm going to stop. I'm not going to keep going back to it impulsively when I'm bored or when I'm bored at work, right? Too much information damages the nervous system chemically and physically. And I could go on a 80-minute tangent about it. That's another one of my talks, right? Suffice to say, too much info is damaging, right? Your brain is telling you that uncertainty equals danger. So you're searching for knowledge in uncertainty, but that is not true. Uncertainty can give us the opportunity to build something new, okay? So uncertainty is not always dangerous, even if it feels that way to your body. That's where coming back to those safety skills is so important. So finally, it's about embracing the path of least resistance, right? We have to accept right now control is limited. So we should focus on what works, where we do have control, and if we can't. If we can't control our 16-year-old sleep schedule, focus on improving your 10-year-olds, right? Focus on where you can make a difference, where you can control things, and what will work. And this will help us find power in this uncertain situation, okay? So we're nearing the end here. So this is final, right? The final part is we've lost our identity, right? We had our lives built up in a certain way that let us know who we were, right? But here's the deal. We are humans first, right? Parents, you've gotten used to your identity being framed as is your job, as a parent, as a friend. Our kids, they're used to their identity as a student, as a friend, right? Their relationships have been taken away. Their structure has been taken away, right? But what we are is we are humans first. So here is a piece of is an opportunity. It's to see this as a metamorphosis, right? See this as a healing period. When a caterpillar goes inside of the cocoon, their body completely dissolves into mush before they become a butterfly. It's not just a pair of wings that grow. There's this massive reorganization. Right now, we are in a metamorphosis. And what's going to determine what happens to our society is each of our individual decisions. So can we be leaders in our lives and our kids' lives in moving us forward? So what does that look like? That means we need to find ourselves, okay? Step 1, acknowledge your worth. Finding worth outside your old rules, right? So validating yourself for your pure humanity, right? Validating your and your child's inherent worth and effort. We're trying our best. We're working to adapt to a pandemic. It's great that we're still alive, right? Validating our worth first and foremost. For those of you who have a spiritual religious background, come back to that as inherent worth regardless of what happens, right? Next is embracing our shared humanity, right? Right now, it's okay not to have the answers. We're humans first. It's okay. We don't know what's going on. It's okay. And if we can embrace that instead of needing to have it all figured out, things are going to get a lot more comfortable. Right? Third is expanding perspective. I keep asking my clients this. When you look back on this time, what will matter the most? And the answer is how safe and loved your children felt. You will not remember how much homework you got them to do. And in fact, you may feel crummy about it, right? It matters how safe and loved they feel right now, right? So asking the question, is this an opportunity for healing and growth? The metaphor I keep using is it's like our arm was injured already, and we went to pick up a baseball and throw it, and ow, it hurt, and we can't throw that baseball. Was it the baseball's fault? No, we already had an arm injury. So COVID is the baseball. COVID isn't causing all of this pain. It's inviting us into an awareness of some of the pain points that already existed. Some of us may need to build up the infrastructure and the love in our family, and COVID's an invitation into that, right? So finally, number 4 is radical acceptance and adaptability, right? We are defined by our response, right? Our life, the outcome is equal to our experience plus the response. We can't control the experience, guys. We can't control COVID, but we can control our response, and that's going to determine our outcome. So most of all, focusing on those safety needs and then those connection needs, our social and emotional needs right now, that's going to be what's super key. So thank you, guys. I hope this information was helpful. At this point, we're going to open it up to Q&A. And what I just want to point out some resources first, and you guys are going to have links to these resources again. You know, the webinar recording is going to be able to be found at the Northville Youth Network homepage, northvilleyouthnetwork.org. The presentation slides are available at bit.ly/parenting in a pandemic. We're going to talk a little more about this. I think we're going to talk about it now and at the end, but I'm offering a ongoing coaching group for anybody who's working to deal with this pandemic, right? It's called Thriving in Crisis, Healing Through a Pandemic. And every week we're going to get together and share resources and work through each of the individual challenges we're dealing with through a framework that I provide. There's also resources from New Hope Center for Grief Support. Jen will talk you through that a little more briefly, but they have resources. They have a ton of resources on the Google Docs. They're also running they're running groups for loss to the pandemic. I'll let Jen explain that a little more. And then Northville Youth Network also has a variety of resources that are going to be available. Did you ladies want to say anything before we open it up to the Q&A?
No, I don't think so.
I'd only note that Google Doc underneath New Hope has resources that aren't just specific to death loss. They're also surviving through COVID. So parenting tips, working with young children, adults. And there's also a great activity on there dealing with change and loss, an activity booklet that parents can engage with their kids.
Awesome. Yeah, and as I said, you know, we're going to walk through our resources more specifically near the end after the Q&A. But Jen, did you want to talk just briefly about your groups?
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. So yes, New Hope Center for Grief Support right now is currently running 15 different groups, and they are loss specific. So if there's anyone that is been impacted by a loss due to the COVID, we do have a pandemic family and friend group that's currently running on Wednesday evenings. And for information on New Hope, you can simply just go to our website or give our office a call, 248-348-0115, and we'll be happy to get you plugged into the right support groups.
Absolutely. And same on my end, you know, again, and we'll talk more about this again towards the end, but if anybody needs any additional support, my ongoing group, my office is available, you know, call, email me, whatever you need to do. We are here to support our community through this crisis. And I'm really blessed to be working with Jen and Amy and both Beth and Sarah from the schools as we do this. So we'll review the resources again at the end. Right now, we just want to open it up to questions. So we have kind of 3 sources of questions. We're going to have people able to raise hands. We're going to have the Q&A, and then we have a couple questions that were emailed. So where would we like to start?
Matt, how about we start with a couple that I received prior to this evening's
Sure.
webinar. So the first one is, our children are 5 and 6, preschool and kindergarten. What are realistic study guides and daily schedule goals? What should the schedule entail? We're having a hard time finding a balance, and our son just wants to play video games.
Awesome. Well, ladies, why don't you guys start, and I'll come in at the end. No, you want me to go? I said if you guys want to throw out an answer, and then I'll come in at the end.
We talked a little bit about this yesterday, and really those expectations aren't set for a pandemic. So probably reaching out to the teacher that knows your child, has been working with your child this past year. They'll be able to help you identify real expectation and goals to set with your child, as well as reviewing some of your expectations, looking at the circumstances in your home, and also taking cues from your child. And then you have to decide what works best for all of you. And right now, it's okay not to be perfect. It's just okay to survive, and whatever is working, to go with that and give yourself some grace and flexibility.
I want to add too, with regard to the academic piece, our schools and teachers have been extremely flexible in what their expectations are, and really every family has to do what works for them. What works for my family might be something that might not work for another family, and it's okay that we're all doing things a little bit differently. What works this week might not work next week, so that's where the flexibility comes in. And I think if we as parents go easy on ourselves, and like Jen said, take your cues from your kids, reach out to the teachers, get their feedback, let them know if there's been some changes in the home and think, you're struggling keeping up. We know we have single parents in our community. We know we have two working parents in our families in our community. We know parents are overwhelmed, and it's coming from all directions. And it's hard. It's a really, really hard time. And I think, I don't want to speak for the school district, but I just as a parent, I would expect, and I think that the schools, would support families and our social and emotional well-being over their academic progress right now. Our kids are going to be fine academically. It's okay. And I think if right now it's really important to kind of focus on that emotional support and well-being, and carrying our kids through those issues.
I'll use a race metaphor. If we're all running a marathon, everybody tripped at the same time. And that's the good news. So our job is to make sure to pick ourselves off the ground and make sure everybody's okay. Especially when I got that question, 5 and 6 year old, the most important thing right now is that they're safe and they're happy. That's the most important thing right now. And you want to make sure that child feels loved, and you want to make sure that child knows that you're there to support them. And honestly, for me, the rest is not that important. Right now is not the time to be making sure that your children's, the same goals aren't going to work, right? And I'm not saying don't set up some level of structure, but Amy said it really well. Take cues from the children, right? If they're pushing back and kicking up a storm, there's some kids who thrive on that structure. There's other ones who will be harmed by it. And I know that's a hard job, but kind of trial and error, right? Figuring it out. And if you get a lot of pain and pushback, recognizing that your kid is processing a lot of junk that you can't see and trying to cope with reality. And it's okay that you are too. It's okay that you're overwhelmed. It's not great that you're overwhelmed, but it's okay you're overwhelmed. And it's okay if your behavior changes because you're overwhelmed.
Okay, I'm going to move on to, is it unreasonable during this pandemic to tell my 16-year-old to go to sleep by midnight and get up by noon at the latest? My teen wants to stay up late as late as he wants and sleep well into the afternoon. We want him to maintain at least somewhat normal sleep schedule despite not going to school and work.
I'll start and then you guys can kind of pick up. I, especially in the late teen years, I'm really going to encourage you to allow your child as much freedom and flexibility in controlling the small things they can control. Understand that right now, them choosing their sleep schedule is one of the very small few things that they can control. And empowering them to do that may be more important than than anything else. That being said, I'm not saying that all structure should go out the window, right? I'm not saying let your kid sleep, go to bed at 6 a.m. and wake up at 6 p.m. and right. That's where kind of sitting down and having a conversation about it comes in. So instead of like, here are the rules, it's sort of like talking to your kids, like, why is your sleep schedule the way it is? Explain it to me. I want to understand. And then if you can kind of understand what your kid is going for, you can help them figure out how to get some of those same needs met a little differently. I think it's good to have loose structure, especially now. So if that's like, hey guys, like ideally bed at 11, but like worst case 12 and 12:30 is the hard line, whatever, like setting some sort of guidelines, but allowing choice and flexibility within those guidelines. And again, remembering your kid's whole life is out of whack, right? And they don't have school right now. Online gaming is one of the few ways of achieving that connection, right? So if your kids are on TikTok, if they're on Minecraft, they're connecting. And I know it doesn't feel like normal connection, but right now you're working on webcam. So, giving them a little grace, that's where they're finding a lot of their connection right now. And I would suggest that kind of diving into their world, asking them to explain it, to show it to you, can make a big difference in creating an opportunity for connection rather than disconnection. The video games aren't evil. The video games are there because it feels stimulating to your child. And if you're busy doing work, you're not there to provide them the stimuli that they need because they're not in school. That's okay. They're going to need to seek that out in other ways. Ladies, thoughts?
I'll share. Last night, my girls, both we live in Northville. One is in the middle school and one is in the high school. There's a 4-year age gap between the two of them. So as far as connection, it's hard because of that space in between them. However, last night they decided they were going to have a sleepover together. So they camped out in the family room, and at 12:30, I woke up to the smell of them baking brownies. So yeah, initially I was upset, but I took it back and really just reflected on there's not a lot of opportunity for connection with that gap in age. So the fact that they were getting along and loving each other was really important and valuable. So that experience was more important.
Yeah. Jenna, I think that's a great example. That's the perfect example, right? Because this is happening in 100 different ways in most of these parents' lives. It's you have that moment. Are you going to get upset about the brownies? Or are you going to understand what's really going on there? And so that's such a great example, Jen. Thanks so much. Amy, any thoughts?
No, I mean, and again, the situation's fluid. So that first week, both of my kids, I never saw them. They were sleeping pretty much almost all day. They would rouse at about 4 or 5 o'clock. And so I kind of let that go. And as they started to come around a little bit more during the day, we did talk about how important it was to have some semblance of a schedule and to try to get rest and balance that with staying up late and watching TV and connecting with their friends, because this is not going to be a permanent situation. Granted, we don't know how long the situation is going to last. We don't know when we're going to turn a corner and start to feel some sort of normalcy or a new normal. So eventually we're going to come out of this. And so and things may be different. There may be some similarities, but we're going to have to, transition into some sort of schedule, whether that's the end of the school year and the summer comes around or whatnot. But, I'm fortunate in the sense, and I recognize this, is that my daughter's pretty independently motivated. So my thoughts are, don't stay up all night. If I can rouse her by noon and get her going and get her doing some chores, the rest of the day is hers to do what she wants. So I'm pretty flexible with the sleep right now.
Yeah, great. So it's just balance, right? Balancing flexibility with structure, finding that middle ground. So I'm looking at the questions. We've got some questions in the Q&A. We've got 2 participants with their hand up. So I'm going to take let's take 2 questions from the Q&A, and then let's go to a couple of participants with their hands up. Is that an okay way to do it?
Thumbs up.
Okay, so I'm just going to go in order, first come, first serve. So we got an anonymous person who says, we are parents of one 5-year-old and we're both thinking about how she could take care of herself if we were both sick and she wasn't. Is that adding trauma? And that's a bad idea. Whew. So I am not an expert on, I mean, this is a very complicated layer question, but I can only speak from my experience, my knowledge, my viewpoint. And the fact is that the more time you spend worrying about that, the more you're affecting your nervous system, and the more that's going to affect the nervous system and the safety in the whole house. Look, I'm not saying that a little planning isn't good, right? Creating a small contingency plan, but honestly, if you're spending more than 10, 15 minutes on it, you're probably in the anxiety zone, right? So I would say, yeah, like I think you're asking that question because you're kind of aware on some level that that is maybe adding to the stress and the trauma a little bit. You know, let's make a small plan for if something happens, but let's try to you know, be in that space of, we can do this, we can be healthy. Remember that stress affects your immune system, and so if you want to focus on being happy and healthy, that's going to make a huge impact on whether you do develop this or not. Ladies, any thoughts?
I think you're spot on.
Absolutely. I think for a lot of reasons, whether it's, you know, an illness or an emergency, it's important that we build our tribe around ourselves, build our resources, have those at the ready, so that we should we need to rely on family or friends or our support system in the community, we would know in an emergency situation or on a short notice who those folks are that we can rely on.
Yep, so that comes back to asking for help, absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna go to a hand raised. So I've got a Linda with a hand raised. So I am going to, how do I do this?
You just need to allow to talk. And Linda, you're unmuted. You can unmute your microphone. We have allowed you to talk, so you can unmute. There you go.
So I guess my question is, if we have, mine is more towards the adult. I have a friend who is extremely overwhelmed right now, and is a parent of 2 who have special needs. And I guess my question is, how do we, you know, in social distance, how do we help those adults who are overwhelmed with what they have to deal with in a household in this atmosphere?
I think just from my perspective, Linda, you know, you mentioned the social distancing. There's some precautions that we need to take, but I think reaching out and offering, how can we help? Is it offering to run errands? Is it offering to get groceries? Things like that, to take some of the burden off of the parents, so that they can shift that attention to where it's needed in the home. So that's just one suggestion.
Okay.
I'm going to take it from 2 different angles. So the first is also being aware of boundaries, right? So Amy said the obvious and important thing. So I'm just going to skip saying the obviously important thing, which is help and ask how you can help, right? And it's okay if you can't help, right? I always say the 2 rules for helping are, number 1, did they ask? And number 2, do you have the energy? Right? So it's okay if you don't have the energy. We can only do so much, right? So it's also okay. So it's great to help, and it's okay if you can't. So there's that balance, right? And then I would say bottom line is, so many of us have not been taught how to regulate the stress in our bodies, that what we've learned is control our environment around us and then we'll feel better. But then we get in a situation where we can't control the environment around us and our body goes haywire. So, you know, inviting her into, hey, you know, I heard this talk, and, you know, it sounds like there's some things you could do to regulate your body. Maybe take a YouTube on the butterfly hugs, see if that would be helpful, right? But directing her towards resources. Hey, I heard about this group. This might be helpful for you. I heard about these resources. It might be helpful for you. You know, you can't be the expert in everything. That's part of why we're here to help. But ultimately, my angle is always going to be, how can she better regulate her body to deal with what's going on, all that stress.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Linda. So let's do another written one. How is it possible to really simplify when our lives in some ways have become more complex? For example, from being parents, working outside the home, being a good spouse, now to amateur teachers. And my answer is you can only do some of them. You can't do all of them, right? And it's okay. And so that comes like, again, being more vulnerable about what your situation is so people know what to realistically expect from you. That's having a conversation with your boss about what's going on in your life and what's possible, right? That's, being realistic about how much you can motivate your kids into learning, that there's going to be a limit and it's probably far less than you would like, and that's okay. But recognizing that you can't do it all, that we've been trained we're supposed to do it all, and that may be an unhealthy response in this situation. So simplify means reduce those expectations, and if all of those are a must, right, then what else can you cut out? Because something's gonna have to give here. You're gonna have to release something. Jen, Amy, any thoughts on that one?
Just really quickly, I mean, it's so important to practice relentless self-compassion. Be gentle with yourself, be understanding, give yourself that grace. That will model for your children how to get through really difficult times when they see their parents being easy on themselves through situations like this.
Yeah, I'll touch on to your point, Amy, not just only letting your kids see the emotions that you're having, but working through them. It's going to give them the permission to have those same feelings. And if we break down in front of them, that gives them permission that it's okay too. It's part of grieving or processing or working through those emotions. So I think it's really important that we lead with vulnerability for our kids so they know that their feelings are okay too.
Absolutely. Cool. Thanks. So let's go back. Let's do, Christina has her hand raised. Can we open up Christina there?
Yep, Christina, you can now unmute your microphone. Christina, you can unmute your microphone. You've been given the ability to unmute. And this is Christina.
I see it. Okay, hi. I think you answered this question about the electronics. Like, I have 4 kids, and I know my teenager, okay, she takes her electronics at night, her cell phone. But what about my younger, like my 13-year-old, 10-year-old, and 8? Like, I feel like they're on it throughout the day, how much time is, and I know it's a connection for their friends, like on the Xbox and Roblox, but how about a limit, not to have it in their room up to a certain time at night? I'm debating. Totally. Like on and off. Some days no, some days on, but I don't know. What do you think?
I would, if you're gonna set structure, you have to be consistent about it.
That's the
and
thing, yeah.
And the earlier you start, the easier it is. So part of your uphill battle is setting structure with kids who have already created habits around electronics. But I'm absolutely for, like, no electronics in your room after a certain point in time. I'm absolutely for setting a limit, like, again, it's different for everybody. It's different in every house. 1 or 2, 1 or 2 hours a day is probably a little not enough, but depends, on the age group, but like, 3 or 4 hours, whatever. And even helping your kids to track the time. Right. I'm a big fan of, like, hey, you got 4 hours, but if you do these chores, you can get an extra half an hour. You can get right. So trying to give kids the benefit to choose those rewards. But again, if you don't have a lot of time and energy on your hands, and setting up all this structure can be very overwhelming. So I don't want to give you another task to do. I think you just have to be flexible and thoughtful about what's reasonable. I would have a conversation with the kids about how they're using the electronics. What do you use this for? What's the most important thing to you? And kind of help them, just start thinking about how often they're using the electronics. Before we go immediately to controlling the behavior, how can we raise awareness around it? And ultimately, we want to help them develop self-discipline.
Self-control. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think, Matt, too, you touched on asking them what they're doing and engaging in that. So even if they're on the phone or on the device, they might be making TikTok videos. They might be outside tumbling and making a video. So that really engaging and asking some questions what they're doing and taking an interest in it will also help encourage healthy habits, what sites they're on or what they're doing on their device with the time they've been given.
Amy, any thoughts?
I just, Northville Public Schools had Katie McPherson involved in some professional development and some community programming recently, and she goes into the electronic devices a lot, and she talks about digital candy and digital vegetables. When you think about it in terms of our diet, what's healthy use and what might be not so healthy use, and so or what we should limit, and that's the digital candy. Obviously, the American Academy of Pediatricians recommendations of 2 hours a day of screen time, and that's TV and electronic devices for children older than 5, to limit it 2 hours, was not written in a pandemic, was not written in a time where we would be relying on using those electronic devices for school and schoolwork. And so they've become so, the kids seem to be so attached to them. And so, like what Jennifer said, what Matt said, with older kids, negotiating what's reasonable and having a conversation with them, but then also looking at are they using it for digital vegetables or digital candy, and where's the balance in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thanks, Christina. We appreciate it. Great question.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so back to Q&A board here. Again, just going in order. This has been awesome information. By the way, I've already read this question, so I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to give you an answer that it's not going to be a perfect answer here. This has been an awesome information on how to manage through the current environment, but how do we know when it's safe to go back into the water, straight transitioning back to our prior routines? I know some things may never get back exactly they were before, but how can we recognize when to start making steps to get back to what we can? My answer is going to be, and again, some people may be frustrated, is we got to listen to the best experts and the leadership we have. We may not always agree with it. We may not, it may cause conflict in our lives, but we, so much of us don't have the ability to collect all that information and filter it and make the best decision. And our fear response is going to want us to go back. And I don't have the perfect answer. I don't know. But the answer is probably not as soon as we would like.
That's when I was talking earlier about routines and schedules and knowing that eventually we are going to go back to somewhat of some type of normal situation. It might look very different, but and that's why it's important too to kind of maintain some of our previous lives. I mean, not letting kids sleep in all day, letting them know that there's going to be some sort of routine and some sort of regularity, and getting used to the fact that, I tell my daughter all the time, it's not going to be like this forever. We're making some adjustments and our lives are changed a little bit, but we will get back to some sort of normalcy, and things will, we'll see some changes. And so it's important to make sure that those, that sort of structure is in place a little bit, that used to look familiar to our previous structure, with adaptations, obviously, for what we're experiencing right now. And then we'll just have to adjust as we go along.
Definitely. I think you're going to have to, like Matt said, follow the guidelines put forth by the professionals and experts and the government, as well as easing to your family's comfort and the circumstances within your family. So if there's, at-risk components, what does that look like for your family, and your comfort level? So that will help determine how quickly you ease back into your, I'm going to say new normal, because I don't think it's going to look quite the same. There might be changes As we're experiencing right now, going out to the stores, we're required to wear a mask. So I think having healthy conversations with our children, that there's going to be some new normals happening, but not out of fear, but just talking them through to kind of taper that fear. So there's not an expectation that it's going to go back to the exact same way it was.
So I'm going to take this, thank you guys. I'm going to take this moment to kind of take a brief pause. You know, I'm noticing our attendees still pretty strong, but starting to move off one-on-one. So I just want to take this moment for us to run through the resources one last time, and then we'll finish up by answering the rest of the questions. So I just want to let you guys know again, I'm making available, it's kind of halfway between a support group and a workshop. It's going to be called Thriving in Crisis, Healing Through a Pandemic. It's going to be every Wednesday night online through PCS-Counseling, and it's just a place to get some information and process through how we can deal with this. For a lot of people, this challenge is going to bring up old unaddressed wounds, and this group is kind of an opportunity to deal with some of that, as well as learn tangible, actionable coping skills that will help us to make this process a little easier for everybody. So if you or somebody you know has been suffering through this pandemic, you know, shoot me an email, call the office. We'd love to get you registered for the group and love to help you out. And as always, I have counselors available. You know, we're doing telehealth, so we do it all. To get to your home. There are a lot of people who are dealing with anxiety and depression through PTSD through this crisis. We would be more than happy to help. Our counselors take most insurances, but we also have some free initial sessions for people if you want to make sure to find the best fit. So those are the resources I have available. Jen?
So if it's coming from a loss, a death due to someone during this time, whether it be from the virus or a loss, death not due to the virus, I would say connect with New Hope, and we'll help you find the right programs and or support groups based on the type of loss, and or if you have a family that's looking to connect, learn, and grow with other families that have been impacted by a death, check out the website, give our office a call, and we will get you connected to the right program.
As far as Northville Youth Network is concerned, we also provide referrals to behavioral health agencies within our area for youth and families. So feel free to give our office a call. The slide that you see right now on the screen, as Matt said earlier, that will be on our website, northvilleyouth.network.org. You can also reach us through the Northville Township's webpage as well, if you don't remember, northvilleyouth.network.org. The presentation slides, as well as the flyers for Matt's group, and then also information with links to Jennifer's groups, and then the resource pages that both New Hope and NYN put together that are COVID related are also on that website as well. We will have a recording of the webinar and the slides on that website by tomorrow as well. And then for all the participants, we will be getting a follow-up email from us that has all of our contact information that should go out sometime tomorrow. It also has a survey. We would like for you to respond and give us your feedback on tonight's webinar, but also share with us any information about support that you need. Our organizations and any other organizations in our community, we're looking for ways to reach out and help folks in our community support one another as we work through this pandemic. And so let us know, is it more webinars? Is it support groups? Is it speakers? Anything? There's a chance for you to provide some of that feedback on that survey that you'll be getting.
And just saying, like, thank you to Amy and Jen, but and Beth and Sarah, but especially Amy. Amy emailed us and said, "Hey, I've got an idea," and it was a really good one. And so, we're very thankful to Amy.
Could not have done it without your expertise, Jennifer's expertise. I called these guys first because, two, I think of the biggest issues that kids are facing right now is that loss and that grief. And a lot of times we tend, we might minimize it. I remember during the first week, my 16-year-old broke down and she was overwhelmed. She missed her soccer season. She missed her boyfriend because we wouldn't let them see each other. She missed her friends. She wasn't sure if she was going to be able to get her driver's license. And I'm thinking, people are losing their jobs and people are dying and getting very sick. But to her, those losses were really, really important. So Jennifer and Matt, with their expertise in trauma and grief and loss, it made perfect sense to partner with your organizations in this. And hopefully, we've been able to provide some support to our participants. And we want to thank all of you for participating. We're still going to continue to answer questions, but in case people need to log off. But we want to thank you for participating tonight.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And so, quick question that I saw come up in Q&A. The question was, will telehealth counseling be available even after coronavirus pandemic? So as Amy says, Amy offers a lot of different resources to a lot of different counseling centers, therapy centers, mental health clinics in the area. And please, I am here to provide information first and foremost. If our counseling center can be helpful, great. If not, we'll connect you with Amy. We'll make sure that you guys get to the right place. For my counseling center, yes, we will always be offering telehealth from now on forever. I think for most counseling centers, yes. This has changed the way we're able to provide therapy, which is a great thing. It's been really beneficial for a lot of my clients. So I'm a big fan, very honestly. Now to the more complicated. See, I just wanted to pick off an easy one. That was easy. Now back to the more complicated questions. I'm actually going to go down real quick because this one kind of touches on something Amy was saying. What is your suggestion for our seniors who are emotional that graduation is canceled? So this is what we're talking about. This is grief. This is a loss, right? They lost they've been 12 freaking years. They've been waiting for this stupid graduation, and now it's been pulled out from under them, right? All of this work, all of this pain. I would be crying too if I were them. This is a big loss. And so, my answer is, let's find our own way to celebrate, right? Is it going to fix it? No. But can we figure out a way to celebrate within our house, within our family? Absolutely, we can. And maybe even more pending social distance guidelines, right? We can create a celebration. And that's going to be really important. And it's okay that it sucks. It's okay that they're grieving, and just be there to talk that through with them and cry with them. And you don't need to fix it. Again, that's the act of listening. You don't need to fix it. Be like, I'm upset too. I don't get to see you in your silly little cap and gown, right? And I'm not saying steal the show. I'm just saying be vulnerable, like Jen said. Feel that emotion with them. It's sad for everybody, and that's okay. Right. And so we don't need to go straight to like, oh, it's just a graduation, da 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 da. No, like, it's sad. It's a real loss. And if we can validate them for that, that's going to be a very powerful, important thing. And then bring them in on how could we celebrate. And if they don't know, you can figure it out. If they do know, can create that together.
I think practically speaking, I think that, the rituals are so important. And we may or may not have some of the rituals that we're used to, the senior all-night party, the prom, the graduation, the way that it is a big, gigantic event. But I know that there are some people working tirelessly behind the scenes to create some sort of new rituals for this class. And I suggest that you reach out to those folks. I think Sandy Stevens is one of them. There's a Facebook group called Northville High School Parents. And there's always announcements on there talking about some things that they're doing. They're doing some public recognition of our seniors on that group. And they've got some things up their sleeves that they're planning. So reach out to some fellow parents to find out what those plans are going to look like.
I think you guys are absolutely spot on, creating new memories for these kids. Matt spoke to being vulnerable and listening. You can't fix it, but you definitely can sit there and hear them so they can hear themselves say it out loud and give them space to process it, because it's going to take a little time. And then coming up with a new way to celebrate it. have your family, friends caravan and beep and honk and balloons and make it a new celebration, shining light on them and their success in graduation. So putting our thinking caps on and getting creative and creating a new memory for them.
So Jen's on fire, so we're going to give another one to Jen here to start off. Jen, any advice about losing a relative during this time not to COVID? I have a 6, 8, and 11-year-old.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, regardless if it's a loss due to a pandemic or not, if it's a loss due to the virus or just a loss that naturally occurred or tragically occurred during this time, it's a new, unique circumstance because of the trauma involved when it took place. And oftentimes we can't celebrate the life with a normal viewing and funeral service, or even visit loved ones that have been hospitalized in a nursing home or maybe sick. So it creates some unique challenges that our kids can't participate in, nor do they understand the process. So Matt, if you stop sharing for a quick second, I can share a great resource that will be on the New Hope website. Or actually, if you go to the Google Doc, there's a ton of information, but there's particularly this great, it's a toolkit from the NAGC, just responding to change and loss to support kids, teens, and families. So it's just a workbook. It's a great resource to flip through and have some conversations with kids of different ages, and keeping in mind that they're at different levels and what they can understand and process is going to look a little bit different. But giving them space and letting them ask questions is extremely important. But this is probably my favorite tool that we can offer at this time. So I'd highly recommend this. And then I'd encourage you to reach out to New Hope Center for Grief Support. We currently have a family support group that meets twice, or actually 4 times a month. We meet twice with kids and twice with parents to help them connect with other parents that are in the same circumstance. So check us out and feel free to give us a call, and we'd love to help you through this grief journey with your family.
And it's worth noting, part of the reason we're all up here is I've been working with New Hope for about 5.5 years now, and all I can do is speak very highly to, New Hope and the resources they provide. And we as a society have lost a lot of healthy rituals around grief, and now we can't even do a viewing, we can't do a funeral, right? Or we can, but it's very difficult. So, finding those healthy ways to have those conversations with your kids is so essential. And it's okay if you don't know how. New Hope is here to teach you. That's what they're all about.
So Matt, if I can touch on the fact that Matt does facilitate our suicide support group, which is another fantastic resource for New Hope, but also the community. I know this past year we've tragically been impacted by a loss in our school system due to death due to suicide. So I just really want to say Matt has been a fabulous resource for New Hope, for the school, and for the community when it comes to helping our kids and community understand and process the grief that they're all experiencing due to that loss. So thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jen. Amy, anything you wanted to chime in on that, or?
No, you guys covered it.
All right, boom, baby. All right, so I'm sorry for this one. I skipped you a couple of times. I was always going to get back. Don't worry. If a parent gets COVID and is very sick, what recommendations do you have to go through the steps of caring for a spouse and potentially serious medical complications, either in the hospital or quarantined at home? Then how to best for messaging to our children. So I am not a doctor. We are not doctors, and we're not going to be able to answer the bulk of this question. But the part I can, so I'm going to encourage you to seek out resources. I think Amy definitely has some resources you can follow through that will point you into some right directions. But what we can answer is how best to talk about with your children. And the answer is be honest. You don't need to go into gory, excruciating detail, but being vulnerable, right? Like whether it's dad or mom or uncle, right, got really sick. The reason we're all staying home at school, they have that, and that's part of why, honey, we're wearing masks and we're staying inside the house, because it's really scary, right? It's really sad. And I'm still working through it. How do you feel, right? Just beginning to have sort of those conversations. It depends on the age, the level of detail to go into. You know, again, my always is like, basically get the question and then answer based on their, you know, their relative age level, right? What would be appropriate. There's no perfect way to go about it. And it's hard, right? Like this will happen to some of those of us who are in this situation, and it's really sad. Ask for help, support each other. Those are my best recommendations, but just be vulnerable and open.
And I'll reiterate again on the Google Docs under New Hope. There's a lot of different resources, articles that talk to supporting your family if a loved one is ill and impacted by the virus.
Amy, any thoughts on that one?
No, you guys covered it. Cool.
All right, we're good. And sorry, question asker, that probably wasn't a crazy satisfying answer, but I will not pretend to know things I don't know. And then we got a love note. Thank you, Mary Kay. You're so very welcome. Anonymous attendee, I am conflicted with adhering to social pressure and remaining strict about social distancing, but also wanting to be flexible and allowing grandparents to visit with my kids. So this is the dilemma, guys. There is no perfect answer. I can tell you in my house, we've been pretty strict about social distancing. You know, I'll give you an example. We had my sister-in-law, who's 19, is staying with us, has been staying with us through the whole thing, and her parents were going to give her a car, and they made a mistake about it, but we kept saying 7 days. Everything it says is leave it for 7 days. So you can't drive the car for 7 days, and then we'll go pick it up. And they kept driving it. So we kept saying, sorry, 7 more days, until we got to the point where it had been 7 days. And then we went and we picked the car up. And then, you know, my mom wants to come over for Mother's Day. And I had to say to her, you know, I don't think that, you know, we've been strict about social distancing, and I don't think it's the best idea as much as she wants to see her grandkid. And so this is where, you know, can we do those Zoom calls? Can we, you know, and then there's the whole, like, they're across the street and you're waving at each other thing. And I have to think that that's an okay compromise at some point. But for me, I'm doing my best to follow the rules. I was in my office until the governor said go home, and then I went home. I'm just trying to let people who are smarter than me, you know, tell me what to do. And it's not going to be perfect, but I certainly am not an epidemiologist.
I think too, like what Matt said, trying to find some new ways of reaching out. You know, we hear in the media about everybody has a different opinion about social distancing and what they're willing to do and not do. And we really, you know, from my perspective, I try to follow the best scientific advice and do what they say. Do what that advice tells me to do. And if that means staying away, staying inside, if that means wearing a mask out in public, that's what we're going to have to do. And to be able to be confident that you're actually doing the right thing to protect yourself, your family, the grandparents. I ordered some colorful, cartoony, floral, a couple different masks for my daughter, and I'm waiting for them to show up. And when we go out, she's going to wear them. I don't know how she's going to feel about it, but if she wants to get out of the house with me, that's what she's going to have to do. So I'm just going to have to, you know, feel confident in the fact that I'm doing my part and doing what's expected of me, and you know, try to utilize that to offset some of the pressure that I might feel, even from relatives.
Yeah, I'm going to say do your best to follow the guidelines set forth by the experts. However, I understand the social pressure from family and friends, and when other kids are doing things, it can be extremely difficult. So that's when you have to go back to what works best for your family and making those decisions for the best outcome of your family, and not relying on that of others or what other people are doing. It's what works best for your family. but try and stay within the guidelines.
Yeah, very good. All right, so I have no more written questions. So if anybody would like, you can still submit a question and answer, or if you want to raise your hand, I don't know, there's a button somewhere on your Zoom. You can raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll allow you to answer verbally.
There's a button at the bottom of the screen. There's 3 options: Q&A, chat, and raise hand. And that raise hand is how you raise your hand in order to be called on. And then we also have a couple call-in attendees, and they can raise their hand by clicking *9 on their phones.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. So if this is kind of our last round of questions, so if anybody would like to raise their hand or ask a question or press *9, now would be a perfect time to do so. And while I patiently wait to see if there's anybody, I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to be here. You know, the important part is that you're looking to learn, you're looking to absorb information, you're not trying to do it all yourself. You're seeking out experts. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep seeking out resources. What's important right now, it's just back to the basics. This is about being a human in the middle of a global disease, confused about what to do, and coming back to just giving love, giving and receiving love. Right now, more than ever, your kids just need to know they're safe and loved, that you're going to do everything you can to keep them safe, and that you love them no matter what. That is the most important gift you can give your children during this time. I got a lot of thank yous and no questions, so I think we'll call it. This was good. It's time to wrap up. So Amy, Jen, and kind of closing remarks, I think. Oh, whoa, ooh, question in under the wire, and I'm going to take it because it's a really good one. From Teresa says, what about seniors impacted by multiple traumas this school year? I was wondering if this question was going to come up. This is my question to answer. This is real stuff. The class of 2020, it has been severely traumatized. We're talking about 2 losses in the span of 3 years and a pandemic. And I'm not saying everybody else isn't dealing with a bunch of crap, but the class of 2020 really got a raw deal. And not just that, but you know, they're friends of the people who were lost, and they may be in class of 2019, 2018, right? But what's important is that a number of these kids have been beset by a pattern of traumatic losses. Friends, classmates, strangers, and now a pandemic. And more than ever, they need that flexibility to mourn and grieve. Number one, get them in contact with a professional, right? And normalize it. If they don't want to do it, you do it, right? You go to a professional and you say, how can I help my kid through this? And you learn something, and you're going to learn a lot, and you can help your kid. And eventually your kid's going to go, hey, you know, maybe I need some help. And you go, not a problem. I know a really good professional that can help you, right? So, you know, these kids are traumatized, and being able to, you know, Teresa, the fact that you asked that question means you see it, right? Just acknowledge that, give them love, help them explore the fact that, you know, they haven't fully healed, and now here comes more, right? This much hurt a lot. Some of them may not even know what they're feeling. And again, that's where a professional come in. I can only help you so much, but just acknowledging that loss, being there for them, processing through it with them. It's those compounding traumas. You know, it's just like compounding interest, but in reverse. Compounding traumas make it exponentially difficult to heal. And so extending grace and love is so important.
I'm going to, yeah, Matt, if I can touch on that too, for those seniors that were impacted or, you know, grieving the loss of a friend due to a suicide this past year. Next Thursday, the 14th, New Hope is relaunching their teen group via a teleconference capacity. So this is a great platform for teens to connect with other teens that have been impacted by a loss. A lot of them will be joining us, a family loss, a parent or a sibling, and many will be joining us that have lost a friend due to suicide. So I'd encourage to get your child connected to that group. It's really connection, just someone else understands what they're going through, and talking through healthy coping skills, and just knowing they are not alone it is a huge important factor to put in their hands. So I encourage you to reach out to New Hope Center for Grief Support, and we can get you plugged into getting your kids signed up for that.
Amy, final thoughts on that question?
I could not answer that any better than the way that you two did. That's why both of you are here, because you guys bring this sort of expertise. I do want to say that if you know, if there are any other questions, people can also ask us questions electronically after the webinar. The page that's up right now is also on the northvilleyouthnetwork.org website. All of these resources, all of our contact information will be there. The email that's going to follow tomorrow with the evaluation also has these links, as well as our contact information. I want to thank Jennifer and Matt. As I said, I couldn't ask for two better experts to share this time with us. I want to thank everyone for participating. Thank you for asking the questions that you asked. I can guarantee you that if you thought of them, other people thought of those same issues, and that's really how we're going to get through this, is helping our neighbors. So thank you everybody for coming. Jennifer, Matt, any closing comments?
Thank you, Amy, for your marvelous idea coming up with putting us all on a platform together. I am very excited that we were able to hopefully bring some hope and healing to many homes in Northville tonight.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Amy. Thank you to the attendees. Guys, this I hope is part of why we decided a community like Northville was important, is because in difficult times and times of crisis, we want to come back to our tribe, right? And we want to be able to figure out how to collaborate and heal together. Guys, this is only begun, and there's going to be a lot more to come. Now more than ever, we need to make sure to take care of each other. And I'm just so blessed to be in a space with Amy and Jen, and yeah, thank you guys for all being together and being here with us.
Thank you, Northville Public Schools, Sarah, Jacobs, and Beth Santer for your support. Couldn't have done it without you. And again, feel free to reach out to us and let us know in what ways we can provide any support that our community needs.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.